welcome everybody to What's Up. I'm your host for today, Danielle Salisbury. I'm joined by my colleagues Colin Adkins and Sean Welsh. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
So we are joined, we're community energy advisors with Cornell Cooperative Extension, working on NYSERDA's Community Energy Engagement Program. Through this program, local community energy advisors in 10 regions across the state help residents and businesses reduce their energy consumption and energy costs and make informed energy decisions. A quick bit about how to participate in this live episode with us. We are live on Facebook. So we have Colin monitoring the Facebook chat. If you have a question for us, just shoot it in the chat real quick and we'll try to get it up and answered by our experts here today. Today's topic is building science. So this is not my strong suit. I have not had the chance to do a lot of training and studying in this topic. So I'm just going to ask Colin and Sean all my questions that I have about it. And the first one is, what is building science?
Well, I think it's really important to note that building science hasn't been around that long. So when the theory of building science really is like an overall kind of building component and really important part of construction has not been around that long. Maybe shades of building science have been. But really building science is looking at the physics, the chemistry, the thermodynamics, the architecture, the engineering of a building, and trying to apply solutions to building flaws and design flaws. And really kind of looking at the history of building science, it really became a more firm part of architecture and construction over the last 25 to 30 years. So if you're dealing with a building that's older than that, you really have an opportunity to address some of these solutions through the programs that we work with NYSERDA.
Okay. And I guess along those lines, maybe Colin, you could answer this for us. Every time I hear about building science, I hear about this building envelope, and my imagination goes wild. Building envelope, what? Can you explain that for us, please?
Sure. It is a really important term when you get into the meat and potatoes of building science, but what it really just means is the physical structure, the envelope, the boundary between your conditioned space where you're heating and cooling the air and the outside world, the outside environment. So building envelope is your walls, it's your crawl spaces, it's your attic, it's your basement. It's that barrier and where these barriers overlap that are really often the focus of improvements and measures to improve the efficiency of the building.
Okay. So it sounds like it takes into account a lot of different things. I imagine, like, you kind of touched a little bit on this, but like maybe how heat moves as well, because I know when we're talking about building science and this building envelope, a lot of it has to do with heating and cooling, with our ventilation systems, like you guys were saying. So could you just maybe, either one of you want to take a little bit about how heat moving through our buildings is affected by building science and the building envelope, and why is that important?
Yeah, you bring up that image we were discussing earlier?
Yeah, I can definitely do that.
And while you're doing that, I'll also kind of say that building science looks at essentially it's physics and it's thermodynamics. It actually borrows information from a bunch of different disciplines, which is really why it's called building science. It's got a lot of science to it. And I'll turn it over to Sean to tell us more about to answer your question, Daniel.
Yeah, so building, air, I would say heat and cool air can move through a building in a couple different ways. So, I mean, there's really 4 different ways it moves. Convection, so that's like kind of like a circular motion. When you're talking about a convection oven comes to mind, you got a fan in there and it kind of moves it around. Condensation is kind of when if you're cooking or heating or taking a shower, you're going to have some kind of moisture is going to kind of evaporate into the air, and then you have that kind of movement. Radiation So the best example I could kind of like how like the sun's light from the outdoor space would radiate into the building, heating up the interior components of the building. And what's the other one? Conduction. So where it's touching. Conduction, you know, if something's warm or cold, like a really good example of conduction would be like I have an old air conditioner, you know, that's a year-round air conditioner wall unit that we just removed actually. But before I removed it, if it was really cold in the winter on the outside, that metal part of the air conditioner that was exposed, because it was a permanent, it was one of those old school permanent air conditioners. You could actually feel, you know, that cold on the frame on the indoor spot, you know, where it was on the inside of the house. So it would like conduct that really cold air right to the indoor space.
Okay. There's a lot going on there, and it sounds confusing. And I mean, looking at this picture that Colin asked me to bring up, it looks like a lot of those movements are portrayed with these arrows, like these blue arrows and these red arrows. Did anybody want to say anything about this before I take it down again?
I will. I'll just say that the house, much like the way a doctor wants to diagnose the systems in our body to understand what ails us, that we need to look at the building as a system, as things that work together and influence each other to understand when somebody has high energy bills or there's too much kind of outdoor air pollutants coming in, what is causing that?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, at least to me, somebody who doesn't have a ton of knowledge on that topic. So you were talking before about the concept of a building envelope. Could you, either one of you, tell me maybe what a good building envelope looks like, and maybe how do we get there?
Sure. A good building envelope, first of all, a good building envelope is going to be, you know, we want to take in mind energy codes and building codes, of course. And there's, you know, commercial structures versus residential structures versus where you live. You know, there could be some things you'd have to research. But really there's a defined conditioned space versus an unconditioned space. So, you know, there's insulation, okay, that's preventing, you know, that air freely moving from one space to another. So that's a conditioned space is a, you know, insulated space.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to ask you because I've heard you use those terms before and I wasn't really sure what they mean. So conditioned space is something that has this insulation, and unconditioned space is something that basically doesn't. Is it like as simple as that?
Yeah. And you really want that definition. So you want that, you know, you want to have it kind of completely encapsulated, and then the insulation space is defined. The insulated space, the conditioned space is defined by like a complete surrounding. So it's all the way around. If you had a house, it would be all insulated, you know, and then you would have a defined space that would then, you know, cut you off from the unconditioned space.
Okay. So for example, my parents' house that has a completely uninsulated attic, if they have insulation that cuts off the attic, they're fine. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, you could do it. You could define that space. A lot of times people will insulate the ceiling below the attic. And even now you're seeing people insulate the attic itself for different reasons. Maybe to you know, combat like one of these building problems that you might have had along the way. Or an opportunity presents itself, like you're going to do a renovation or you want to make that a livable space, or even like you're redoing a roof. Now we're seeing people like lay down rigid foam board or a roof to make that space, you know, condition that space and get some, you know, energy efficiency going on.
Another way to kind of give some context to this is also to look at where there's bad examples. Because if there's a really good example, you almost don't notice it. We're comfortable. We're cool as a cucumber in our house and warm in the wintertime. But where you notice that there's not good synergy between these barriers in the conditioned spaces is from bad examples. So like I lived in this really inefficient apartment in Saugerties a couple of years ago, where you could just hear the wind kind of blowing through the place, and you could, if you opened the door, I was on the third floor, if you opened a door down low, you could feel air rising up very quickly. And even now, I'm in a much more efficient place, but I still notice some interplay between the apartment above mine and ours. So right now, like they have their AC on all the time. I don't even have mine running, and it's coming down through the unconditioned space behind me that then infiltrates into our conditioned space, because there's not a really good boundary between those two.
Yeah. I could add to that. I've the house I used to live in, we had, it was an uninsulated upstairs, really. I mean, it was kind of patchwork insulation. It was an older house. It was always very uncomfortably warm on an 80-degree day. If you went to the upstairs space, it was just unbearable. You'd had to have, an air conditioner going and all that, all night long, just to be comfortable and be able to sleep. And the reverse is in the winter, of course, it was just so cold that, it was very uncomfortable. So those are telltale signs that, some efficiency work or some kind of looking at it through a building science lens, there's problems that can be solved.
And that both of you touched upon something that I wanted to talk about really quickly was that there are these seasonal and geographic differences that can dictate like moisture and temperature, right? I mean, could you explain a little bit about that?
Of course. Up here in New York State, in the colder climates, we have a much longer, what's called a heating season, where our mechanicals, our heaters and boilers are running, and then a relatively short cooling season. So when we're trying to cool the air, but we do both here. And also in the Northeast United States, we do have a lot of moisture. And moisture is something else that is extremely important in building science. It's all about controlling moisture and making sure that moisture leaves. We have moisture in our house from cooking. When we boil water, or when we have water in our environment, it's evaporating. We produce water actually just from breathing. And actually, I found this really fun trivia question for you guys.
Oh, no.
I'll give you a quick trivia question on that. So a family of 4, through just exhaling and sweating, can produce approximately how much moisture in one day? And I got a multiple choice for you. Is it 2.5 cups of water, 2.5 pints of water, 2.5 quarts of water, or 2.5 gallons of water?
I'm going to say gallons.
Oh God, I hope not. I hope not. I hope it's like, I'm thinking, 2.5 pints.
All right. Ding, ding, ding. Oh, wrong way. Ding, ding, ding. Sean got it.
No.
2.5 gallons of water that we're putting into the air.
That
It's
is
so
so
much. This according to the Building Performance Institute training resources. That's a lot of water, and you want to make sure that that's going out because when water and moisture builds up, you get issues with mold. The physical structure can start to break down, and so moisture is extremely important in building science.
Yeah, and your mechanicals, I mean, in some buildings, there's things that need more, like you need to dehumidify more. You need to, it depends on the building. So you need to make sure those mechanicals are all operational. Your duct work's good. Your pipes aren't leaking. All those little things do all contribute to this bigger, phrase, building science. It really is a science, and it has to do with the whole house as a system.
Yeah, that's a great place to end. We are at our 15-minute mark, but before we end, I do want to bring it back to what Colin said, is how you can diagnose a house like a doctor diagnoses a health, like a body. And there's actually programs where somebody can go in and diagnose your house, quote unquote. These are things that are energy audit programs. So there's one called the Residential Energy Audit Program. And for people who have specific income restrictions, there are two other programs, which is Assisted Home Performance and Empower. So there are several options depending on your income, but it's somebody comes in and does an energy audit on your house, which is, they come in and they diagnose where are you losing heat, where are you losing, where are you wasting your energy, where maybe is moisture, piling up in one spot and things like that. And I know we're going to go more in depth on that in a different What's Up. So stay tuned. And actually, does anybody remember what next week's is? I have already forgotten. Is that the energy audit?
It's our energy assessment, energy audit night. Yep. So next week we'll do a deep dive into energy assessments and really kind of talk about, what from a contractor's perspective and a homeowner's perspective, what, you should be aware of.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both again for your wealth of knowledge and helping me learn a little bit more about this crazy building science topic. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah.
Colin, did you have the last thing to say?
No, I was just double checking that we didn't have any comments come in through Facebook. I don't see any, but let folks know that you can continue the conversation with us by posting your comments on the Facebook page. And we're also going to drop a link into where you can contact us to get connected with all these programs.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, we'll see you next week.